Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this exciting book launch event with award-winning poet Tim Lilburn. My name is Dawn. I'm a student at the University of Saskatchewan's MFA in Writing program. So this evening we will have a reading from Tim Lilburn, followed by a conversation with Sherry Benning, as well as a Q&A period with questions from the audience, from you guys. So please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen throughout the event. We already know it's working. And then you can continue to add comments and praise in the chat. And we'll save that so we can have a look at it after as well. So that's kind of how the night's gonna run. Before we begin, I would just like to give a land acknowledgement. So as we saw, we're coming together from many different places today. But I do want to acknowledge that here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, we are located on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to the First Nations people and the Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So now I will pass it over to Sherry Benning, who is one of my wonderful professors at the University of Saskatchewan and also an incredibly talented poet in her own right.
Thanks, Dawn. So welcome everyone to this, as Dawn characterized it, very exciting event. Before we begin, I want to thank the English department at the University of Saskatchewan, and in particular, Dawn Munchrath, Diana Teagan-Camp, and Amy Guerin for helping to arrange this event. I feel very, very honored to introduce Tim Lilburn today. 2 decades ago, my brother and I were students in his introductory philosophy class at St. Peter's College in Munster, Saskatchewan. We were young and didn't fully realize this at the time or initially, but we'd come to realize that this class was unlike any other, true exchange. Here's an example of Tim's innovative pedagogy. One day in class, he stood up in front of the room and he held a $50 bill. And he said he'd give it to anyone in the room who could name 10 Indigenous plants outside the classroom window in the prairie beyond. This is in a room of farm kids, so you might think it a risky bet, but no, no one could do this. Tim Lilburn that day left with his $50 bill, and we left with so much more. The sudden awareness of our impoverishment, our inherited ignorance as farm kids of European descent in this place. And this awareness that Tim planted in us was now, when I look back on it, an extraordinary political gesture. I mention this because while his artistic career as a poet and philosopher is immense, so is his vocation for teaching. As an educator and an interlocutor, he's changed lives. He's brought pupils and friends to greater beauty through nourishing conversation. Tim went on to become a professor at the University of Victoria, where he taught creative writing until this year. Harmonia Mundi is his 12th book of poetry. Lilburn has been nominated for the Governor General's Award twice, for Tourist to Ecstasy and for Kill Site, the collection for which he won the award. He's also the author of several books of essays, most recently, The Larger Conversation. The essays explore eros and politics, the environment, and questions of decolonization. His work has been translated into French, Chinese, Serbian, German, Spanish, and Polish. It's been widely anthologized both in Canada and internationally. In addition to the GG, Lilburn's work has received the Canadian Authors Association Award, the Saskatchewan Book of the Year Award, and the Saskatchewan Nonfiction Award. He was made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada in 2014, and in 2017, he became the first Canadian to be awarded the European Medal of Poetry and Art, the Homer Prize. Tonight, we're celebrating his latest collection, Harmonia Mundi, with Corbel Stone Press. Details of how to purchase the collection can be found earlier in the chat. Thank you, Tim. I look forward to your reading. Tim, you're on mute, so we'll just have to take you off.
Yeah, that $50 bill thing, that was pretty that was pretty brazen and bold. I can remember thinking only two people in this province can claim this bill, Trevor Harriott and Sharon Butala. So anyway, yeah, thanks for remembering that. That's great. I enjoyed teaching philosophy at St. Peter's. Um, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Wasanich and Lekwungen territory, unceded, in so-called Victoria, British Columbia. I would also I'd also like to thank, before I read some poems, I'd like to thank the wonderful people at Corbel Stone. They said that they were going to come. It must be in the middle of the night in England, but yeah, that just their generosity as a press, their vision as a press. I think they're doing some of the most exciting work in English literature written in English. So I really salute them. There's maybe some Corbel Stone authors also in the audience. They publish a magazine called Relique. I know many people read it just avidly every time it appears. Okay, Harmonia Mundi is in two parts. The first part is called The Philosophical History, and it is purported to be by a late Neoplatonist, 6th century or so, by the name of Priscianus. The second part has a different feeling entirely. It's more contemporary. I think the philosophical history is also contemporary in its own way, but I mean it comes out of an historical situation, which I will explain now. So this is a little note at the beginning of the philosophical history by Priscianus. In 529, the Emperor Justinian, supported by the official church, suppressed the Academy of Plato in Athens, and a particular form of knowing, theurgic, therapeutic, metaphysical, went underground. Priscianus was a member of a small party of philosophers led by Damascius, who carried the academy to the Persian court of Khusrau. They believed the young tyrant was an earnest student of Plato's works, but they soon discovered him instead to be cruel and prone to feverish swings in temperament. Damascius's ascesis, ambulatory. His head in the mouth of the way, he carries the machine of the entire world system across the desert to the Lord on the far side of the river. Lizard tongue, exfoliating winds, nonstop. Khusrau yammers from 8 p.m. to 2 p.m. the following day. Arrowfall questions with breaks for igniting rockets, whose burned stocks courtiers report with reports on their range. Damascius fans on a court carpet, one ecstatic recital, then another, face down. Khusrau's energy is insane. There he runs along the colonnades. Isidore, pedagogue. I saw the meteoric stone. I saw the beetle, its short purple quills. The soul holds a luminous vehicle, star-like, unbroken, in a sheath, lodged in some in their heads, others in the right shoulder. Immaculate body that accompanies the soul, sweeping in webby weight at its edges, its warming pelt speed. I saw the beetle, which is not this body, but the oracle's clear fixed mouth, shifting in air, now sequestered, covert in the clothes of its guardian, now in the cup of Eusebius's hands. This rock, I believe, is moderately wicked in its short purple quills. As I tell you this, your soul grows gray eyes. Minus 45 degrees in these parts, these nights, in this expanse of snow. Men keep low fires roused below their fueled conveyances through the dark hours. Damascius's Overland. Non-orbiting forms, their nerves tendriling to lichen horns and eyelash. Prescribed rhythm in hips and hands, in the ritual placement of cereals and wood. All we pack with the solid geometry of cosmos through the deserts to the tyrant of Persia. All reduced to a speck in the lead hermeneute's right eye and carried to the high yellow walls on the east bank of the Tigris. The dialogues, their commentaries, maps of psychagogic places to which we travel, he and his companions, Haran's hive-shaped libraries and sparrow-back colored clay temples. Camel bells tunk, our robes fill with dust. Talking with the Mad King. The Dionysian state of true philosophy is meutics and logic, which produces such crystals as Pythagoras and Iamblichus, winged souls in the meadow of divine forms, we say, pointing up. Men tend to bestow the name of virtue on a life of inactivity, but I do not agree, Damascius tells him. For the virtue which engages in political activity and discourse fortifies the soul. The beast clears his throat. That is why the learned who sit in their corner and philosophize utterly disgrace themselves if compelled to take some action. He snickers, treadling heavy legs below lapcloth, and coaxes a wad along pursed lips as if it possessed fetal powers. We brought him the reel. He sends the ball out, emitted self-sprout, donated mystical egg to the crepuscular world. We are half a month's walk from Haran, which sits inches inside the edge of that empire that hates us. And one last poem from this, from the first part, the last one. Envoy answers to King Khusrau. He becomes calmer. When less troubled, he begins the autobiography in which great lizards clear the roof of still rising northeast mountains to light and arm him. Those whose loose hissing wings ripple fluidly in dreams. His wife, breathy shill for Nestorians, propels currents through palace rooms, and within them he finds himself calmer yet, and mulls concordats on trade in shimmering uranium ore. He becomes calmer and gathers us to stand before three questions on the soul. Its hard nature, of course, its homogeneous placking of every cranny, then the deep linkage matter. I mentioned Plato's bowl in time fever, and Likeness's deliria, where wave curl wrought innumerability, wild celery flower, early universe arithmetical buds, whale lung spectacle mash. Under the hammering pestle, spouting the igneous human language, rainforest brain, and he bursts into Zoroastrian conflagration. And at the height of the burn, preternatural clarity and command on synaptic intentionality, and meteorology stride toward him alone. A moan, duduk moan, nightly from rocks, dried riverbeds. At our elbow, Theophrastus's on harmful bites. So that was selections from the philosophical history, the first part of Harmonia Mundi. I'm going to read now from the second section, which is called Actans Conatus. Devoted readers of Spinoza out there in the audience will recognize Conatus as the sentient spirit in everything, like a kind of mind in everything. Actans Conatus. Both these sections deal in different ways with loss. I mean, obviously the philosophical history, Actans Conatus. Look there. And the daemon, hair tied to one side, black, his sentness a creek dropping 6,000 feet on stone, the caught in the throat, the angel's cold mind, now a dragonfly's livery and light armor, now a human smell, appears standing in ferns, watching. Northeast of Creelman, Saskatchewan, mother. My brother and I end up here, the stone house, not ours really, belonging to the English family, generations gone below Gooseberry Lake, 1/4-inch frost on the inside face, blue and yellow boulders, roofless. Pelicans jerky on water 1/2 mile away. We should, we know, be head down and budding in creek thickets of arithmetic or at football practice. We push through drifts, room to room, blood reports, partly burned photographs, black corner brackets attached. We pass staticky Geiger counter hands over as on TV, bits of machinery, energy ash, puffy around them. Everyone gone as we expected, mother, aunts, uncle driven out to work at 12, barefoot, stooking behind the binders and staying out. We think through this, but go looking for them anyway, coming back to fire pits each late afternoon to set fresh blazes. Then Greg disappears, 2-3 weeks, no word. Animal set at the center of unlit oil pots. A boar with no obvious wound sits in a rostrum chair. The theater before him is dark, aside from his drained light, directly above the alert, if awkwardly seated body. Emptily dark, the theater, yet suffused with quivery outlines of ears. That dark, yet stacked with moist breathing. The boar wishes nothing will be said about what he reports. Nothing must be repeated outside the room. He's been to the Persian throne and had explained to him what will certainly come. He's been to the Northwest frontier. He urges us to scratch out shallow pits in the ground. The boar reappears. He understands. In this dream, the boar comprehends that the stone is moral. There, perfect nature, emboldened eye and flowing crest. Energies, mercies with lizard-like movements sluice through grass, trailing veils of mouth smell, tangled veils of neural maps, changing by the instant. Burning oil pots are set around the animal, and then a further ring of flaming pots goes around the extent of his speech in the long hall. The animal reads from the famine book, its lips moving as they try to manage the four tones. Occasionally, the creature stops to make commentary on nodes in the Tao Te Ching. One final piece, kind of a mid-length piece, Actants Canatus. In these cold rooms, a few steps into his quadlibital questions, John Duns Scotus tweaks a lamp and makes appear across a wall. It is necessary that the primary formal reason for just this singularity stems from a thing intrinsic per se to the singular in question. Thus, a fork appears on the teak table, shining like a boiling elf, just before I press the button on the dishwasher door to start the cycle. Advent, 1306, University of Paris, worn of plastered rooms, horsehair bound in the milky mix, smoke from fires in the streets, Rue Coupe, gluey, rutted. He is in there remarking on the particular, mote loosened from the occultation of objects. A fern of speech grows on window glass. So the thing rises in itself like a trout. The Cowichan River untangles from mountains along the large island's rain hump to coil through corn and grape fields away from Clearcut. The water in enclausteration, in the veil of being beyond its name, moral power peels back. What? Just what does it pry and draw back like a lid precisely and displays the stepping forth skin? Tight with gravity thing pit, forehead peering jewel, it itself and what's left of corn tassel, grape burgeoned, odd standing fir or alder with wind alone around it, dangerous iris-like stuff there, each speck lunging inside classical form, at which for quite a while I have been aimed in flying marriage. Light is not dug out of a thing by a thing tearing at itself with its claws. It can't or won't do this. Dishwasher, the fires, no. Nor is it left back, lost in seeing slag, but gets punched or pillowed up, spruced, burnished by water so that it stands up or slants toward, appears in a mouth filled with tiny, near invisible, conscious hairs. What it does, who would have guessed? Then it is that one lone fur, fork, caked lick of mane hair presents a piece of paper, causing it to slide across teak laminate under the spectral hand of the angel's mind, written on it your own simple name. Thank you for listening.
Great, thank you for that reading, Tim. So yeah, I guess I'll start with this, the question about the first long poem that you read from. The book sort of appears, or the book kind of has two parts: the first long poem, and then the second part dealing with poems that are more situated in the present day, although they also call upon thinkers that are mentioned in the first part of the poem. Yeah, how do you, or can you tell us a little bit about the inception of that long first poem. It's
Right.
interesting to me the connections that might be drawn between that event that the poem references and our current moment of climate catastrophe. And I'm just wondering if you
Right.
see a kind of connection. Yeah. Can you speak to
Yeah,
that?
that poem started in I'm thinking about 2015. And I attended this conference that Erica Grimm set up in Langley, where she put together artists and writers with climate change scientists from UBC, University of Washington, Seattle U, etc. And we spent a day together, and it was an extraordinary day, and it I guess everyone has this moment where they kind of like they kind of get that climate change is here, not just notionally but emotionally. And so I experienced what I call, I mean, it's a kind of a crazy name to call, but just new sadness. Like it was a sadness that I had never experienced before, and I became quite curious about how other people in situations where everything appears to be lost, how they coped. And I've been kind of trailing Neoplatonists for years, and I ran across Damascius's The Philosophical History, which is essentially the end of, in a sense, of the experiment of the academy. Tremendous loss, like the loss of a worldview, and just Roman steel and kind of crazed, dangerous hair trigger person in the form of Khusrau remains. So yeah, that was I mean it. Yeah, no, it was that conference and what came over me in that conference that sparked that poem. And it just kind of accumulated over the years. A new one would come in, and I just drop it in and try to put some shaping into it.
Yeah, no, and then it seems to me that the second half of the book, as you mentioned, it speaks to losses, personal and broader. And so how do you see these two halves of the book in conversation with each other, I guess, or do you?
Yeah, I think there's sort of mourning on both sides, and dumbfounding on both sides, and as with all dumbfounding, there's absolutely no clarity. So yeah, but also there's this in the second part, like especially the last poem I read on, basically a poem about Don Scotus's notion of thisness or achaity. There's, I wouldn't say it's hope, but there's energy. There's this
and humor.
Yeah, and humor, and just this sense of holy crap, it's beautiful. I mean, it may be on a slide, but it's beautiful, and so that's there. Also. Yeah, just there are wreckage of world systems as well going on in that second one.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think I guess too, like I'm wondering how. Well, okay, I'll put it this way. At a literary conference that you spoke at just before the pandemic really kicked off, and it was sort of, I remember it as being the last literary event I was at in person, and you spoke about several writers who you admire, Louise Haff, Sylvia Legris, and their penchant towards a kind of long poem, right? A sort of a preoccupation or central preoccupation that animates the through line of their work across years. And if I might be like really bold, and suggest a kind of central preoccupation of your work seems to me to be that question of how to be here, which is the title of that kind of famous essay of yours, and how reckoning with that question is revolutionary, because people of European descent weren't really engaging with that question in this landscape. And also kind of wild in that the sort of honest pursuit of that question might lead one to living outside of prescribed extractivist economies. It could lend a kind of wildness to your life. And so I'm wondering, like, how do you see these new poems as a kind of modulation of that question, or as a kind of extension or outflow of that question that sort of initiates the work all those years ago? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a perennial question for me, the autochtonicity question. And it's, like, for someone like me, a diasporic European, and all of the crap that is brought, it seems like kind of a long shot, autochtonicity, but it also seems absolutely essential. Any kind of peace or sanity or is out of reach without some kind of asymptotic achievement on that. Like, you don't get the whole thing for reasons that George Grant pointed out quite succinctly, back in the 80s, because of what we are and what we have done. These gods cannot be ours. So great injury there, all over. How does Harmonia Mundi tie into this? I think it's in it somehow. I don't know. I can't really say, but it's. I mean, this is a question. It's not a philosophical question for me. It's a personal question, and it's daily. It's daily for me, an urgent question, and yeah. I think there's grief here too, especially in the second part. Yeah.
Mm.
Very, very cheery, bright book. Like.
No, but I was really glad that you read Creelman, the Creelman poem, the Northeast Creelman. The image of those two brothers in the old stone house, and then the second half of that poem, which people will read when they see your book, the mother in the care home, and the poem entitled "Sing." And I was thinking about how the kind of attending to the ruins in that poem was so powerful, and how there's a kind of there's something important about doing that, and
yes. Yeah, like that book you put me on to, Morning Nature, Ashley
Consuelo.
Consuelo, yeah. She speaks of activist mourning, like holding to the just sadness, taking that as a position, and I think there's a lot of that spirit in Harmonia Mundi.
Yeah, and I think too, like, the collection, like we are in this we are in this moment that's hard to sort of conceive of, this, it's like an unfolding extinction event, and it's I find like the work of this collection giving voice to that sort of mourning is an act of great generosity, I think, on your part. Like, it's sort of a little cache of nourishment as we move through this time. I want to open up the floor to questions from the crowd, if there are any, or if you want to throw them up in the chat or the Q&A. Don will take note of them. I wonder about your use of proper names in the collection, Tim. Like, this is like you do this kind of throughout your various books of poetry, but you will summon Gillian Rose or Val Plumwood, or alongside Duns Scotus or Jack Blakelock. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to your use of proper names. Yeah.
I just think summon the sages. some of the people who had nourishing insight, sustaining insight, bring them into the community. Yeah, Dunscotus, Ariugena, Bonaventure, all these, like, I feel strangely kind of contemporary with them. I mean, I think that not solace, but insight lies there. An insight that brings substance and discernment. So yeah, that's another, I mean, that's where, in a sense, that's where a large part of how to be here, that question went. I mean, it went into an attempt to disinter the West sapiential past. I mean, you know, like it's kind of buried. Like not many people have conversations daily at Timmy's about their so and I mean, this might be not a way out. There's no way out, but this might be a good route. I think of it as the Dionysian route. So I would include people like Priscianus and Damascius and Proclus and Iamachus, all those folks, and yeah, and many, you know, Sufi like Ibn Arabi. So all these people maybe don't visit in this book, but they're there.
Yeah, I mean, elsewhere you've either written about or spoken about, or both, how this moment that we're in, like of climate catastrophe, rising populism, is a kind of mythopoetic failure as well. Like, and so part of the task is to sort of, make these retrievals from a more contemplative tradition as a means of redress. And yeah, it's and I see that happening in this collection too. It's like you're generating this community of thinkers around the poems that might sort of point to a different way or a different mode of participating in the ecology of things. Yeah. Are there any questions, Dawn, or are people being quite shy and quiet?
People are being a little shy right now. I have a question. I was wondering, like you said, that this is kind of a preoccupation, something that that you think of a lot, like your relationship to the land. And I wonder if that was always the case with you when you were young, or what, like, how did you come to this place?
No, I had this experience way back in 1990. I'd been living in other places. I grew up in Saskatchewan. I grew up in Regina, and my family farmed in the southeast part around Windthorst and whatnot. Anyway, I came back to Saskatchewan in 1990, and I don't know, I had this strange experience on the steps of the Regina Public Library. It kind of just shifted everything for me. I was walking down those steps. It was you know, like a summer day like today, and I was looking at Victoria Park right in front of me, and all of a sudden, just a bolt out of the blue, it hit me that I didn't really know how to be where I was and where I'd grown up. I mean, Sherry mentioned not having the names for things. That's part of it, but I just didn't know how to. I knew how to live in suburban culture, no problem. You know, fill up the car with gas. No, I get it. Go to the drive-in movie, whatever. But to actually live where I was, I had no skills, and I was shocked by this. I didn't even know that this was a thing, you know. But it just got me between the eyes, and I realized I was in real trouble. I had to find a way, you know. And yeah, no, and I think for a lot of people, there's a kind of an ontological loneliness, like they're lonely for where they are, like it's not quite clicked. And yeah, anyway, that's what happened to me, and it was kind of later in my life, and I was very surprised. And then, well, it became the thing I thought about. I mean, it's not done. It's not done. And it just seems bigger and bigger to me as I age. It's a bigger question. So it's a personal question, granted, but I think it's a pan-cultural question.
Warren Haiti has a question. Professor Lilburn mentioned the settlers' asymptotic curve toward I have a very difficult time saying this word, full disclosure, autothenticity. Tim, you know the word I'm trying to say. Is it, yes, and there's is it similar to Damascius's trek to the foreign court, trying to preserve the dying flame of Platonic philosophy? Both fail, but is it important to really try?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to not try would be to succumb to a kind of abysmal boredom and a kind of nothing state. So the fact that it's pretty clearly unachievable in a complete way, it is no reason to not pursue it. I don't think there's anything else on offer, frankly. I know some people might get mad at me for saying that, but I think this might be it. That's pretty bold. That's like waving.
Yeah.
But
and if it's
like I've looked and looked, I've turned over all the stones around here. I can't. I don't know.
But how do you sort of like if it always ends in a kind of almost failure, like how do you kind of maintain the effort? Yeah.
As you move, asymptotically move, you find yourself a little bit fed, and then a little bit fed here. Something's doing the feeding. There's this word I've been trying to learn. My Sanchrathan teacher is very, 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 very patient. For the last 8 years or more, I've been trying to learn Sanchrathan, which is the language of this area. And there is a word in Sanchrathan, it's tango, which means, at least in my understanding of it, the merciful in teaching land. So, you know, there are these little food packets along the way, and in almost a kind of Franciscan sense, they're, you know, perfectly sufficient, and they're also little joy packets as well, like sort of these little chocolate things that got a lot of chocolate stuff in it.
It's like the trail mix with the chocolate chips.
Yeah. The philosophical equivalent of that. Yeah. So yeah. Why not? It's delightful.
Can you speak a little bit? You taught a class at the University of Victoria, writing into climate change, and can you speak about that gesture in your vocation as an educator? Just the notion of writing into climate change, and what you're kind of thinking, and what that might provide, I guess, is the question.
Well, that class comes out of something that you and I set up and ran at St. Peter's. I think it was in 2018 or 17, something like that. And the thing I noticed there is how eager people were to talk about their experience of meeting climate change, really for the first time at a deep emotional level. So at UVic, like it was last summer, it must have been last summer, I wanted to provide students with that possibility, because I got the impression talking to them that it's something that they think about quite a bit, but there's no real arena for conversation. This is something that, you know, it's a little scary to sort of pick it up, and where would you go with it? So I wanted to give the students a chance to talk about that experience of encountering this new sadness, but also let them engage their imaginations with this particular problem. And I always personalize. And so, yeah, I would like to do that again. I'd like to do that class again, because I do think there is a need. Like people like to talk. And
Yeah,
and
this came up too when you were at Sage Hill. I know Jean Van Loon is in the crowd this evening, and I remember that experience of that conversation we had at Sage Hill in front of that window overlooking the Qu'Appelle Valley, and thinking myself that this was the first time that this was sort of being addressed in a way that felt sufficient or adequate to the moment. Like how do you effectively come at this issue, right? With the poem, and it just seemed kind of revolutionary at the time. So, yeah, and we're still kind of living inside this, like not knowing how to articulate it, but moving towards it, and and somehow that seems like an important gesture. But yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Like it's not like a solution. It's like an exercise. It's like a spiritual exercise. So yeah, you pick it up. You just, and
Can I ask you what you're working on now, Tim? Like, are you?
Not much. Yeah. I mean, well, no, actually, I've finished a collection of essays called Numinous Seditions, Interiority and Climate Change, and it's at a press. They're thinking about it, scratching their heads, propping up the windows with the manuscript. But yeah, no, I finished that before I went on this big trip back to Saskatchewan. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Are there any other questions from the there's a lovely comment from Danielle Janis. A gift to hear some of these poems aloud again. That boar, ! And other animals as characters, the land alive, animals as sentient, performative characters, and how all this awareness of the non-human has acted on the human figures. Yeah, how the urgency and energy builds in the language, the music, the arrangement, and yes, the characteristic injections of humor. It feels magnetic, it really rings. I think that's a really beautiful comment to end this evening's reading on, if there are no more questions. So thank you very much, Tim, for this tonight. It was a true joy to hear you read, as it always is. And yeah, thanks again to Dawn for helping to make this event possible. So yeah.
Thanks to both of you for doing this. It's been grand. And thanks again to Corbel Stone. It's an extraordinary press. It's really an important press.
And information on how to purchase Tim's book is in the chat, and will also be sent out as a subsequent email to everybody who's registered. So thank you again, everybody, for attending. Dawn, I'll turn it to you.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a really lovely evening, and I'll let you guys enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Yeah, and then emails to follow. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.